Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on another Thursday webinar. Today's topic is how to handle client death in the Redtail CRM. Now, normally this isn't a topic that we normally want to, cover, but it does happen in the industry where a client or maybe one of their spouses or somebody that's in your database passes away. And we want to just show you the best way of that might give you other suggestions itself on how you can handle this inside your own database. So to do that, I'm going to switch over to the CRM. And first things first, what we want to do is talk about the database lists. So we want to make sure we have an appropriate way to label somebody that they have passed away. And so we're going to use our status field for that. And to change anything in the status, we're going to go to our name in the top right-hand corner, then choose Manage Your Account. Once you're on the Manage Your Account page, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom to where it says Admins Only, and then you're going to select Manage Database Lists. Now, after you're on the Manage Database List section, over to the right-hand side, we can find the Contacts area, and we're going to select Statuses. Now, I already have deceased in here as a status. You'll notice that I have all of my statuses and deceased is in here. If you don't have something like deceased, all you have to do to add it is just choose Add in the top right-hand corner, and then you can type it in and then just hit Add Contact Status. That's going to make it available now for any contact record to be able to change to that status. The main reason we suggest putting it as a status field is because, again, the status is the highest level of segmentation that you can customize. And so, for instance, they're either going to be an active client or something else. So again, that we have like prospect, active client, deceased, spouse of client. The point for statuses is you can only have one status, and you want to make sure that you don't want to add something to where it can be duplicated. So again, if they're the deceased, then they can't also be an active client at the same time, and that is why we're deciding to put it here. If you happen to label your items a little bit differently, that's definitely fine. You might also want to consider using maybe the category field for this as well. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is actually setting up an actual process to make sure that we do all of these changes. And I like to actually start the process based off of a status change. And the best way to build out a process is going to be creating a workflow. Now, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of building out a workflow, but I will show you that we already have one set up in here. And so I'm going to go to my name in the top right-hand corner and then choose Manage Your Account. Once I'm here again, now I'm going to go to the middle section where it says Manage Templates, and I can select Workflow Templates. And in here, I already have one called just the Client Death Workflow. If I open it up, it's actually just two simple steps that I go through. The first one is a list of office tasks of things I need to make sure that I need to do inside the Redtail database or also outside of the Redtail database. But the purpose here is I can have a task that's going to send condolences. If I need to acquire a death certificate, can have a task for that. Then other things like filling out the date of death field, the family name change, updating the head of household. There's all these different tasks that are available, and I want to make sure that none of them get missed if I ever change one of my statuses to deceased. Now, after I do all these office tasks, in this particular workflow, we actually have five other tasks that happen afterwards for different things. So for instance, we have one specifically for Valentine's Day that we like to set for 2 weeks before. Now, these particular items are going to be set manually because these dates can possibly change depending on the client's date of death and then their actual birthday themselves. But maybe these are just items that I want to make sure and reach out to my clients for, or maybe they're the surviving spouse. So for instance, on Valentine's Day, 2 weeks before, I'm going to put in an order for a flower arrangement and send that out. Or maybe I'm also going to put a task for the surviving spouse's birthday, and then a task for the deceased spouse's birthday as well, their anniversary, and then even the date of death anniversary. This again is just to give me the ability so I can make sure, are there other times throughout the year that I want to reach out and make sure that I'm doing the best for my clients. So we're actually going to initiate this workflow and run through it a little bit. But first off, I want to actually automate this workflow. So to automate something, I need to actually base it in an automation template. So I'm going to go to my name in the top right-hand corner, then back to manage your account. And then again, under manage templates, this time we're going to go to automation templates. Now here's where I'm actually going to build out an automation template. And what I want to happen is anytime I change a status of a contact record to deceased, I want that automation to actually automatically trigger my client death workflow. So that way I have those tasks automatically pop up. And again, I know I'm not going to forget to change anything that I want to do. So to create an automation, I'm just going to choose add in the top right-hand corner. And then from here, I'm just going to call it, we'll say client death workflow. So client death workflow, that's what the automation is going to be starting. The trigger event is going to be the contact status change. This is why it was important when I first started talking about having a status as deceased, because I can have that as a trigger event. So anytime I change a status, I can have a reaction. And in this case, when I go up to do this action at the top, I can select that the reaction is going to be linking the workflow, specifically the client death workflow. Now, again, I only want this this client death workflow to start if the status I'm changing to is labeled as deceased. So in that case, I'm going to go to if all conditions, and then to the right, hit new condition. And from here, I'm going to choose that the contact status has to equal deceased. And if that's not true, it's not going to start my client death workflow. So again, this automation that we're setting up is based off of the contact status deceased. So on the event of changing the status, it's going to link the workflow, client death workflow, if the contact status is equal to deceased. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and create that automation, which means it's now live and ready to go. I'm going to go back to my main page, just back to the today page. And then from here, everything is set up in the back end for me to be successful if anytime I have to change a status to deceased. So let's actually initiate that. What I'm going to do is we're going to use Tim Taylor as our example today. And so let's say, for instance, unfortunately, maybe we heard that Tim Taylor had passed away, and now we need to initiate this. So what I'm going to do is over on the right-hand side under contact details, I can hit edit. And then from here, I'm just going to choose to change it over from active client to deceased and update the contact details. As soon as that happens, and if I refresh this page, what you're going to notice is in the top right-hand corner, if there wasn't a workflow, there will be one added there. He already had two different workflows attached to him at the time, and that's fine, but a third one attached. And so that number went up to 3. If I actually click on that number, I can see right here that we actually had an information update, a trade process going through, but the client death workflow has started. And so if I open up that client death workflow for Tim Taylor, I can now see the tasks that need to be accomplished. So in this case, I can send condolences. I can mark that off when that happens. If I need to acquire about the death certificate, I can do that as well. The next task down the line is going to be update the date of death field in the contact record. So to do that, what I'm going to do is go to Tim's record back on the left-hand side. So I'm on his main page. And over to the right-hand side, under contact details, I can choose edit. And then from here, I can fill out the date of death. Now for here, let's say, for instance, he passed away on the 19th. So I can select the date of death. Anytime you select the date of death, I do want to point out that the birthday reminder will be automatically disabled. So he's not going to show up on any birthday reports or even the birthday reminders at this point on. It's also going to stop the age counter from continuing to go. So again, the date of death, once filled out, is going to disable the birthday reminder. And so I can update that field. As soon as that's done, I can go back to the workflow if I want. So I'm going to just scroll down on his contact record, and we can see here's all the open tasks. And right here, the update date of death, I can complete that and mark it off the calendar. Or sorry, mark it off my list. Next thing I want to do is I want to update the family name and the head of household. So both of these can actually be done together. And so what I'm going to do is up at the top here, where it says Tim Taylor and it says the Taylor family, I can select that. What you'll also notice is because the date of death was filled out, now there's going to be this red bar at the top of Tim Taylor's record letting me know that this contact is deceased. And that is strictly because of the date of death field inside of the contact details. Now, if I need to change Jill over to the head of household, it's easily done by going to Jill's record in the family name and then actually just clicking the linking. And then I can change, actually, this is a little different. What I'm actually going to do is actually choose the action button. This is where you want to change the head. So we're going to choose the action button and then choose change head right here. And then I can select that the new head of household is going to be Jill. This will automatically actually put Tim over into the spouse section, and I can leave him there. There's a few different ways of thinking about how you want to manage this. You can leave Tim in the spouse section, but if you do, it is still possible that they can appear up on mail merges or different things like that where you include the spouse. You can also come in here and then decide to move him over to just other for now. If you want to keep him as part of the family, but you actually don't want him in the spouse field, this actually opens up the spot to be able to add a spouse in the future if Jill does get remarried. Now, in this same case, now that Jill is head of household, if you do need to change how the family name is addressed, maybe you had Tim's name in there, you can definitely come over to the right-hand side and choose the action button and also edit it and then change how the family name is listed. In this case, I'm going to continue to still refer to them as the Taylor family. All right, so let's actually go back to Tim's record now that we have the family updated. And I'm going to scroll back down to my workflow tasks. And we're seeing on the client death workflow, I can mark those both. We updated the family name and we updated the head of household. Now, I also want to make sure that I can change the marital status on the spouse record. Okay, so from here, I can still deal with both of them. Also from here, I'm going to move the reminder to the spouse. So in this case, I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the record. You'll see that we have the client review reminder set for Tim Taylor. I can actually open this up and then go to the client review reminder because I don't want to be reminded to give him any more client reviews. That is now going to be on Jill's record. So when I edit from here, there's a few different ways you can do this. I normally suggest just removing the first review date and choosing this not to repeat and updating it so there is no repeat. The other option you can do is just go into repeat ends and then choose for it to repeat on, let's say, today's date or even the date of death. I can say, we're going to say it's going to end. This is going to stop it from continuing. I normally suggest only choosing the repeat ends if you want to keep the original first review date field. Again, if that information isn't needed anymore, again, you can definitely just delete this itself so the reminder isn't going to continue to occur. But after I stop that from happening, so there is no more next review date, I can go back into the Taylor family, go into Jill's record, and then make sure that she has a client review reminder set up because it's very important. I want it to continue. So at this point, again, because Jill is the head of household, I can go into the client review reminder section, edit, and then start from the beginning of when her first review date was, or even maybe continue it based off of when Tim's was, if you deal with them as a family, and then just update to the same settings and then continue from there. Now let's jump back over to Tim's record one more time, and we're going to mark a few of those items off. So again, I'm back on Tim's record. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, back to those workflow tasks that we're going through. And we did the review reminder, but we forgot to do the marital status. And that's what's great about having a workflow is even if you're going through doing a few different things, if you happen to forget, the workflow still has it there. Those tasks are open, ready to go, so I don't need to miss anything. So at this point, I need to make sure and change the marital status. That itself is also in the contact details. So I can edit over here and I can choose this to, I can actually just mark this as no marital status and remove the anniversary. Now in that same case, I actually want to take that actual anniversary. So if I need to find it, I can actually just cancel out of that. I want to take this anniversary and I want to put it on Jill's record so I still have a reminder, or actually take this date and I can actually put it in my workflow because remember, I have tasks set up for the next step in line to reach out about this date. So we're going to say it's 3/11/20 is what it's going to be. I'm going to update the contact here. And so in this case, again, I can scroll back down to my workflow. I can mark that I updated the marital status on the spouse record. And then from here, I can also go into the client death workflow. So I can mark the next step once I finish all my tasks under the client relationship, those reach out dates. And I can say that I'm going to be reaching out on the anniversary on March 11th. So let's actually do that. We're just going to do for next year. We'll do March 11th is their anniversary date. And I'm only doing this again if I want to reach out on their anniversary as part of keeping up with the relationship. And again, that's what all of these are down here for. I can manually choose when these birthdays are for each of the surviving and the deceased spouse. You don't actually have to put all of these. I would only suggest whatever you plan to reach out to your clients for. If you want to do this, that's what you're going to put in this second step. And again, this is all customizable by you. You get to decide how you want to set this up. Now back over here, we already changed this. We also need to change the spouse status itself, and we need to move the notes over to the spouse. Now, there's different forms of thought about the notes themselves. If I want to move all of the notes from Tim over to Jill, I definitely can. You can even copy individual notes over to the record. It really all depends on how you set up your database with your note taking. So if the note goes into every single family member when you're dealing with them, both the head of household and the spouse, then this is a step you don't necessarily need to do. But if you're in the habit of only making notes in the head of household and that's where you want all of the notes to be, then in that case, you can come over to the notes page of Tim, and then up at the top, I can choose options and I can choose to move notes. And at this point, I can say I want to send these all over to Jill's record. And so I can find Jill, select which types, regular notes, activity notes, mail merge notes. Maybe I'm just moving regular notes over and I can move them. This is going to keep the time and date stamp of all of the original notes, but just moving them over to Jill's record. And it's moving all of the notes. If you need to move individual notes in a way, you can actually go over to each note individually. And then you can choose to either copy it to a contact record or you can move that individual note over to another contact. So again, you have the option of doing the notes one by one, or from the notes page, choosing options at the top and then move notes, and you can move them all together. And again, that's just a suggestion if you want to move all of the notes in Tim's record over to the new head of household record. All right, let's come back over here. We also need to go in and change Jill still because that's on our workflow. So up at the top, if we go to back to the Taylor family, because we still have him linked, we can easily get over to Jill. And we see that we have her marked as spouse of client, but now she's no longer the spouse of client. She is actually the active client. So we can mark her here. We're going to say she's going to be AAA. And then even here, we can fill out client since. We can fill out marital anniversary if you want to put that reminder there as well. That's definitely an option. But keep in mind, you want to fill out all the information because Jill is now your head of household and should be treated as such, and make sure that you have all the information you needed for her. Even if you have another automation that has a workflow automatically start when you change a status to active client, that can initiate a workflow for Jill. So not only do I have an outgoing workflow for a client death workflow for Tim, but I can have an onboarding like information workflow going for Jill when I change her status. So there's a lot of different things you can do in regards to setting up for how to handle client death. So again, it all comes down to how you want to manage your clients. And we always suggest the best way to do so is to make sure you have the appropriate data like a status, and then setting up a workflow to make sure nothing falls through the cracks at that point. So I'm going to update her here. I come back to the Taylor family. I can jump back over to Tim. Same thing. Maybe I want to change his category. Anything that you don't want listed on the deceased client anymore, you want to make sure and change. So that way you have the appropriate data inside all of your contact records. Now I'm going to scroll down just a little bit again, back to the workflow task and see what we have available. So we changed the spouse's status. We moved notes over here. We moved open activities. Here's another item you want to do. Make sure that you don't have any open activities assigned to Tim, and we can assign those over to Jill. So again, I can come over to activities on the left-hand side under Tim. I can look, there's nothing for the next 6 months. I can filter this out maybe further. I can do a custom range, but I want to find any activities that might be assigned to him, so then I can move them over or even complete them if I need to the appropriate people, so those tasks still get accomplished. All right, so after you move those tasks, next thing I'm going to do is come down here and we can mark that off, our workflow. Perfect. And the last thing that we have on this step is going to be add memberships to surviving family records. So if you don't want to continue to leave Tim as part of the family, which is definitely fine, I have him in as under other because I still want the ability to have a possible spouse for Jill in the future. If Tim stayed in the spouse field again, that might give the option of having a mail merge fill out his name when you don't need it there, as well as you can't add a new spouse. So if you do remove Tim from the family name or from the family section altogether, or even leaving him in here, we highly suggest that you still set up memberships to the other family members. And in this case, I can come over and click on more, scroll down to memberships, and then I can set up the different relationships. Now for here, you'll see he's listed between, has a membership with Al Borland, Marie Kondo, with Tool Time as employer, also with Wilson as his neighbor. I want to set this up with his spouse, so his widow. So to do that, I can choose add in the top right-hand corner. Then I'm going to search for Jill in here. I'm going to select Jill's name, and then I'm going to define the relationship now that they have. So the linked contact, if I come over here, is I can see if I have something for surviving. And I think I do. And I do not. And that's definitely fine. But what we can do is we can add that in there. But for now, I can actually just put spouse. You do have the ability to customize this. But the contact is the deceased spouse. So I can actually just do it this way. If I want to list Jill is the spouse and Tim is the deceased spouse, that's definitely an okay way to do it. But again, you do have the ability to customize these dropdowns so you can define the relationships in any way you choose. So again, I can add that in there. And so now, anytime I look at Tim's record, I can look at the memberships and know that he is still tied to Jill because he is a deceased spouse. And actually, in this case, I would probably want to use widow or widower in that particular case itself. But again, that option might have been there. You can definitely add those in there if they are not. So at this point, I'm going to go back to Tim's record, and I can scroll back down, and I'm going to mark that we added the membership. Now, because it's a workflow, and this is the last task on that workflow with the step, I have the ability for outcomes to populate. Now, in this case, if I don't want to do any of the other relationship building afterwards, I've set up the ability to just complete the workflow from here. But if you do want to reach out and go to the next step for those other holidays, things like that, I can then choose that particular outcome, which takes me to the client relationship section. And then from here, I can say, updated all fields, put in my notes, complete that step, and then move forward. And then now you'll see that I have the new step with all these other tasks to where I can then manually add in the dates for when they specifically are. And those are going to stay on this contact record until they're done. And again, it's normally just for setting those up in the first year. If you want to go further out, that's definitely fine with you. I do like to point out that the workflow, again, is at your disposal for however you want to set it up. So it's a great tool to use. On top of this, everything we're covering here today, we also have on our help desk. And the easiest way to find that is by going to the question mark in the top right-hand corner. Then from here, you can go over to the other question mark that says Redtail Help Desk. That takes you straight to this page. And the best way to find this is you can actually just type in, if you just type in the word death up in the search, we actually have this how to handle PDF when you click on it, and it takes you step by step, different instructions on what we suggest. So from where we started today, where you can create a deceased status, it shows you how to do that, all the way through changing all that information from date of death to changing the information on the spouse and the family name. And then all the way at the bottom, we even have that same workflow filled out for you so you can actually copy and then adjust it. So if I scroll all the way down on here, we have this client death workflow. And so you can actually take this as a base and then build that workflow on your own to make sure that it's appropriate for your own office.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.